In the early 2000s, a kid from Virginia named Christopher Maurice Brown, better known as Chris Brown, would take an interest in becoming a musical artist. In 2002, at the age of just 13, Chris Brown would be discovered by Hit Mission Records. After Puffy refused to sign Chris Brown to Bad Boy, he would begin working on demos. A couple years later, in 2004, Chris Brown would sign to Jive Records and begin working on his debut album. The next year, on November 29, 2005, Chris Brown dropped his self-titled debut studio album, which was an instant success, selling 154,000 copies first week, debuting at number 2 on the Billboard. After this, Chris Brown would go on to have a very successful yet controversial career throughout the 2000s and the early 2010s. In the early 2010s, an Atlanta-based rap group called Polo Club was formed by rapper Quavo along with Takeoff and Offset. Eventually, they decided to change the group name to Migos. In the early 2010s is when Migos would begin dropping mixtapes such as Jug Season, No Label, and YRN. In 2013 is where Migos would blow up, dropping their track Versace on July 18, 2013. The biggest rapper in the world at the time, Drake, would remix this track, giving it insane exposure. After that, it was clear that Migos was one of the hottest up-and-coming rap groups. Migos would sign with Quality Control Music and 300 Entertainment in 2015 to drop their debut studio album, Young Rich Nation, on July 31st, 2015. On this album was a track called Just For Tonight, featuring Chris Brown. This is when Quavo and Chris Brown would begin working on music together. After this, in 2016, is when Quavo would begin dropping music as a solo artist. On April 29th, 2016, Chris Brown dropped a track called Whippin' featuring Quavo and Smoke Boys. The next year, on January 27th, 2017, Migos dropped their album Culture, and Chris Brown actually helped Migos promote the album. It seemed as if Chris Brown and Migos had a really good relationship, but in 2017 is when things would take a turn for the worse. Let's backtrack to 2011. Chris Brown began dating Karrueche Tran, who was a stylist for celebrities at the time, so that's how the two met. Eventually, Karrueche would become an actress, but in late 2014, Chris Brown and Karrueche would split up after Brown allegedly abused her. In February 2017, it was reported that Karrueche got a 5-year restraining order on Chris Brown after he allegedly threatened her life when he demanded her to return diamond rings that he gifted her, to which she refused. Tran alleged in court that Brown texted her violent threats such as, "I can get my money back and I'm tired of playing games. I will beat the shit out of you. I promise I will make your life hell." Now, many people speculate that this was just a PR stunt done by Karrueche and her manager. One Reddit user pointed this out, saying, "They talking about Karrueche. I don't know why they believe this. Her manager set that shit up to say this about him." She even did an interview and her manager kept talking over her and you could tell she was frustrated visibly. Also, her manager told her to give Chris her location, and when he pulled up, she was instructed to act like she didn't know what he was talking about, and now the internet got believing they was toxic. If Chris really hit the girl, she would have been left him and put the papers on him before anyone even knew about royalty back in 2015. As you can tell, Chris Brown and Karrueche have a terrible rough past. Now, you're probably asking what this has to do with Quavo. In 2017, Quavo and Karrueche actually started secretly dating, but Chris Brown didn't know at the time. On March 24th, 2017, Chris Brown sat down with Desiree Thompson for an interview with Billboard, and during the interview, Chris Brown would give a huge shout out to Migos and praise them, saying, in quotes, "I just want to shout out y'all. Y'all my real friends and brothers. I bought your album 3 times. I spent my own money and shit. I'm proud of you dudes. I will never hate on you guys." Now, these comments didn't age well at all, considering the fact that Quavo was dating Chris Brown's ex behind his back. Many speculate that the relationship of Quavo and Karrueche was the reason for the restraining order to allow them to date without an issue. It wouldn't be long until Quavo and Karrueche's relationship would go public when they were spotted together on multiple occasions. Now, of course, Chris Brown was not going to be happy with this, being that he considered Quavo as a brother and a good friend, so this is when the beef would officially begin. That summer, this would all come to a spearhead on June 25th, 2017. The BET Awards was held at the Microsoft Theater in Los Angeles. Chris Brown and Migos were all in attendance and actually had performances that night. After the show, there was an after party nearby the Microsoft Theater, which Chris Brown and Migos both attended along with other artists. This is when Quavo and Chris Brown would get into an altercation when a member of Chris Brown's entourage allegedly pushed Quavo, which led to Future and DJ Khaled being in the middle of the altercation. Eventually, a bunch of Migos crew members surrounded Chris Brown's vehicle, but he left untouched.
Chris Brown.
When you finagle your way into the Migos fight, they was fighting somebody, security, let me stay back so I don't get beat up and kicked out.
Oh my god. Yo, don't entertain this shit.
The next day, TMZ interviewed Quavo, asking him about the altercation with Chris Brown, to which Quavo said that it was all about money and haters, so he's basically saying that Chris Brown is hating on him for dating his ex.
Everyone wants to know what happened at the BET Awards, a big commotion backstage, you and Chris Brown.
Having a whole lot of paper. That's all it is. Having a whole lot of paper.
You mean a whole lot of cheese between...
A whole lot of paper, a whole lot of haters, man.
After this, the public would now fully be aware that Chris Brown and Quavo did not like each other. After this, the beef would die out for a couple of years, but fast forward to October 2020, Karrueche appeared in court, seeking to extend her restraining order on Chris Brown to make it permanent. The next year, on July 16, 2021, Chris Brown would call out Quavo to a basketball game during a post-game press conference after a Crew League celebrity tournament. Chris Brown took to his IG story to call out Quavo and Jack Harlow, saying, "They knew who not to ask on that 2-on-2 basketball. I would have cooked Quavo and Jack on my soul. Guess they wanted a smoke-free zone." Quavo would respond on his IG story, accepting Chris Brown's challenge, saying, "Chris Brown ain't cooking nan. Call next." Chris Brown then responded on his IG saying, "Ain't no next, I'm on now, set it up." Chris Brown continued saying, "You know this work different. Me and Austin McBroom versus the little boys." After that, everything went quiet, but in 2024 is where this beef would reignite fully. On January 22nd, 2024, a video would surface of Chris Brown and Quavo sitting next to each other while attending the Rude fashion show at Paris Fashion Week. Chris Brown would address why he sat next to Quavo and basically says he still doesn't like Quavo when he took to IG to write, "Can't pick who you sit by, fuck all that gross shit. Not finna fumble my bag for little dudes." A couple of months later, on April 11th, 2024, Chris Brown dropped the deluxe edition to his album 1111, and on the track Freak, he dissed Quavo, saying that Quavo is with his old girls.
Okay, now my old bitches ain't gonna make a sequel. Sippin' at 1942 cause I don't do no Quavo.
He also references Migos' hit song Bad and Bougie, and directly name drops Migos.
Freak. She like Casamigos, not the Migos. I don't fuck with bougie bitches, man, that shit is all hot.
Quavo got wind of this, so that same day, Quavo dropped a track called Tender, and on this track, he took shots at Chris Brown. On the hook, Quavo says that Chris Brown did Karrueche wrong and references the allegations of Chris Brown allegedly hitting her.
Did a bitch wrong and that a bitch gone, she post with a thug. Caught a bitch phone, she won't come home, don't beat her up.
On the second verse, Quavo addresses Chris Brown, asking what his issue is, and if this beef is all over Karrueche.
Tell me, little bro, what your issue is over a thought. You said it is bigger than that, but no, that it's not. It cause I be digging in that, it got 'em hot.
He then says that Chris's girl was on his neck.
I'm giving respect, but I know you not. Your bitch on my neck, your bitch at the spot.
9 days later, on April 20th, 2024, Chris Brown dropped a full-on diss track on Quavo called Weakest Link. The cover to the song is Quavo eating a hot dog. Chris Brown says that Quavo shouldn't be talking like a thug.
Quavo talking like he a thug, nigga, you a bitch with dread. Can't wait to see the day that you back up all of that shit you said.
Chris Brown then responds to the accusations of him assaulting Karrueche by exposing when Quavo allegedly assaulted Sweetie in an elevator in 2020.
I put Amigo on a ventilator. Stop talking about beating girls. You was beating on the elevator. We seen the taste that's devastating.
Chris Brown got real disrespectful when he mentioned Migos member Takeoff, giving him an RIP, but saying that everyone wished it was Quavo that died instead.
RIP Takeoff, he the only real one that got true respect. Crazy how when he died, everybody really wished it was you instead.
Quavo, of course, got wind of this, so 2 days later, on April 22nd, 2024, Quavo dropped his response diss track on Chris Brown called Over and and the cover art is him choking Chris Brown. This track featured an unreleased verse from Takeoff, who Chris Brown mentioned in his diss track. Quavo starts off the track by mentioning the root of this beef, which is Karrueche.
Boy, wanna die by some coochie? You still die by Karrueche?
Quavo then refers to Chris Brown as a singer turned a junkie and says that Breezy ain't been in the trenches.
Why they got Quavo out here going back and forth with a singer that turned to a junkie? Never got light skin versus brown skin. Finna divide the country.
Quavo then calls Chris Brown a crackhead Michael Jackson because Breezy does receive a lot of comparisons to Michael.
Crackhead Michael Jackson, you better beat it, nigga.
Chris Brown would take to his IG to react to Quavo's diss track saying, "Google raps, that shit is poo. Damn, and I was excited. That shit don't even need a response. Takeoff rap better." After that, the beef went quiet and it is unclear whether Chris Brown will respond or not. But according to Breezy, that diss track doesn't need a response. So who do you think won the battle? Quavo or Chris Brown?